You never think a case will follow you. Not like this. You read about the ones that stick. The ones that turn good cops into shadows of themselves. The ones that send men home looking over their shoulders, listening for sounds that shouldn't be there. But you tell yourself, that won't be you. You'll close every file. Shake every bad memory. You'll move on, like the rest of them. I thought I had seen it all. I've been with the department for over 20 years. That's 20 years of crime scenes, of calls you wish you hadn't picked up, of walking into rooms where the walls still held echoes of something you couldn't quite name. 20 years of paperwork, reports, red tape, and the same routine. You take the statement, collect the evidence, file it away. Another case, another day. But this case, this wasn't another day. This wasn't another crime to file away. We never solved it. We thought we had reached the end. Thought we had exhausted every lead. The reports stopped coming. The questions faded. The case was pushed aside. Just another folder in a room full of them. That was our mistake. Because just when we thought it was over, someone made sure we knew it wasn't. Tonight, I'm going to tell you why. The call came in just after 2 in the morning. I was at my desk, finishing up reports that no one would ever read twice, already thinking about heading home. Another quiet night. Another shift that would slip by without incident. Then the radio buzzed. Dispatch patched through a 911 call, routine procedure. But the moment I heard it, I knew something was off. Not just another domestic dispute. Not another drunk dialing in, not even the usual break-in. This was different. A woman. Her voice barely more than a whisper. Breathless. Ragged. And then she screamed. Not the kind of scream you hear in this job and brush off. Not fear, not panic. Something deeper. Something that sank into the bones. Then, static. The line didn't cut out. It didn't drop. The signal was fine. But the voice on the other end? It was just gone. I stared at the radio and asked again. 911. What's your emergency? The voice on the other side was now hoarse and trembling. They took him. He's not real. Help. Too late. That was it. The line went dead. No further calls. No number to trace. We thought maybe it was a hoax. We get those sometimes. People thinking it's funny to call in cryptic messages, to waste time. But something in that voice, something in the way she said those last words, I couldn't shake it. 10 minutes later, I was in the cruiser. The house wasn't far, just past the outskirts of town, down a road that barely showed up on our maps. No neighbors, no traffic, just miles of empty space leading up to a house that shouldn't have felt as wrong as it did. I knew the second I pulled up that something wasn't right. You get a feel for these things after long enough. The way a place looks before a crime happens. The way it looks after. The difference between a house that's just empty and a house that isn't. The front door was open. Just a crack. No lights, no movement. And no sound. I stepped out, radioed in my location. Standard procedure. We never go in alone. Backup was already en route. But I didn't wait. The air inside was stale, like the windows hadn't been opened in weeks, like whoever lived here hadn't breathed in a long time. The living room was untouched. No overturned furniture. No signs of struggle. Just the quiet weight of a place left behind. There was a cup on the table, still half full. A light jacket draped over the back of a chair. A television remote left just inches from the edge, like someone had been reaching for it. Whoever had been here hadn't planned to leave. I moved deeper into the house, flashlight in hand. The hallway stretched out in front of me, lined with photographs. A family, smiling faces, a husband, a wife, a child. 3 lives caught in still frames, perfectly frozen, perfectly whole. Then I saw the door. The master bedroom, the only one that was closed, and the only one covered in scratches. Not normal scratches, not the kind you'd find from a pet or from moving furniture. These were deep, uneven, wild, as if something had been trying to get in or out. I reached for the handle, turned it. The door swung open, and inside, there was nothing. No bodies, no signs of struggle, no forced entry, and no sign of life. There are things that don't make sense in this job. Things that don't fit into neat little reports or crime scene photos. Things that leave you staring at your own notes at 2 a.m, wondering if you wrote them down wrong. Wondering if, maybe, you just imagined them. This was one of those things. I swept the house, room by room. Nothing out of place. No overturned furniture, no broken glass, no blood. But it wasn't empty. There were signs, little things. A door left slightly ajar when it shouldn't have been. A chair pulled just an inch too far from the table. A draft in a room where the windows were sealed shut. And then there were the clocks. Every single one in the house, on the walls, on the nightstands, on the stove, frozen at the same time. 2:09 a.m. I checked my own watch, 2:47. My radio, working fine. No power outage, no interference. Then I saw the handprints. They were on the walls. At first, I thought they belonged to the family, maybe the kid, but they were wrong. Stretched, distorted. Some too large, some too small, as if whatever left them didn't quite know what hands were supposed to look like. And some impossibly high on the ceiling. We dusted for prints later, ran them through every database we had. There was nothing to match. And then came the biggest question of all. The bodies weren't here, not in the house, not anywhere near it. No signs of a struggle, no forced entry. And yet, less than 2 hours later, they were found. 3 towns over, 70 miles away. And no one, not us, not the neighbors, not the cameras, saw them leave. I spent hours reviewing the footage, frame by frame, second by second, looking for anything, any movement, any sign of someone entering or leaving the house, anything that made sense. Instead, I found something else. At first, it looked normal. The street, empty. The front yard, undisturbed. The house, dark. Then, at 1:57 a.m., a car pulled up. The man who stepped out. He looked normal. For a second, I thought it was the husband. Same build, same stance. But then I noticed the reflection. In the car window, just behind him. It didn't move the same way he did. I played it again. Slower. He shuts the car door, turns toward the house. But the reflection. It turns. A second too late. I rewound it. Watched it again. And again. Every time, the same thing. Then, at 2:03 a.m., the camera caught something else. A shadow. Just barely in the corner of the screen. Not a person. Not an animal. Just movement. There. Then gone. I adjusted the contrast, turned up the brightness, tried to get a better look. There was nothing there. And then, 2:09 a.m., the footage cut to black. Not static, not interference, just gone. When it came back, the house was empty. And the car was gone. The man never came back. Not on camera. Not in the reports. Not in the morgue. Because, according to every record we checked, he never existed at all. You tell yourself that things like this don't happen. Not to people you know. Not to people you work with. Disappearances happen in old stories, in places far away, to people whose names fade from memory before they ever meant anything to you. Then it happens to someone you know. Then it happens to someone like Ramirez. Dispatch clocked it at 3:12 a.m. Routine check-in. Ramirez had been sent out to review a tip, a reported break-in at an abandoned building. No forced entry, no movement inside, no signs of anything unusual. He checked in like normal, said the place was empty, said he'd do one last sweep before heading back. That was the last time anyone heard from him. At first, no one thought anything of it. Radios cut out sometimes. Battery dies. You miss a check-in. Happens all the time. But then 15 minutes passed. Then 30. Then an hour. By the time backup arrived, his car was still there. He wasn't. The patrol dashcam was running. We reviewed it frame by frame. Static at first. Then, at exactly 3:17 a.m., something changed. A sound. Not speech. Not breathing. Just a sound. A whisper, maybe. Wind, maybe. Something just beneath the edge of hearing. And then a gasp. And then nothing. The only thing left in the car was his notebook, sitting open on the passenger seat, waiting for us to find it. There was only one thing written on the last page. Don't follow me. The case should have ended there. Should have been ruled an outlier. An accident. A mistake. It wasn't. I started looking. Not at Ramirez, not at the house, but at everything else. And that's when I saw it. Ramirez wasn't the first. I pulled up old reports, missing persons cases, closed investigations no one had looked at in years. The dates didn't match. The details didn't match. The stories didn't match. But the location did. Every time. Same stretch of road. Same square mile of woods. Same absence of explanation. People vanished. Officers. Civilians. Travelers passing through. Some were found later, miles away, disoriented, with no memory of how they got there. Others were never found at all. But there was something else. A pattern. When I marked the cases on a map, I expected randomness. Expected it to look like any other spread of missing persons reports. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. A shape. A pattern repeating itself over decades. And it was pointing to something. This was never just one case. Never just one house. One officer. One missing person. It was something bigger. The tip came in late. No name, no details, just a voice on the other end of the line, low and uneven, like someone speaking through clenched teeth. They didn't tell us who they were. Just where to look. Don't go alone, the voice said. If you go alone, you won't come back. I asked for a name. Silence. I asked what they'd seen. The Hollow, they whispered. That's what they call it. You don't go there after dark. The line cut out. We traced the call to a payphone just off Route 16. Security footage showed someone standing there, head low, hoodie pulled up to hide their face. The timestamp blinked. 2:09 a.m. Same time as everything else. We sent a unit out to the location the caller mentioned, a clearing in the woods just outside town. No records of any structures, no reason for anyone to go there. Just a patch of land no one talked about. They found something. Something burned. The soil was blackened, charred in a perfect circle, as if something had stood there, burning, for hours. There was no ash. No one could explain it. And then they sent me the photos. I've been in these forests before. I know the way trees sound when the wind moves through them. I know what normal looks like. This wasn't normal. The trees were too still. The air was too quiet. No birds, no rustling, nothing. And then we found it. The clearing. The grass was burned away in a perfect circle. The dirt beneath it was black, but when I touched it, it wasn't cold. It was warm, like something had just been there. And then Carter found the rock. At first, it looked like nothing, just another stone, half buried in the dirt. But when we pulled it out, we saw the carving. A symbol. Not a letter, not a word. Something older. Something that shouldn't exist. I've seen a lot of things in my years on the force. This wasn't one of them. And then I heard it. A voice. Small. Barely a whisper. From just behind me. He's still here. I turned. No one was there. And then the ground moved. I thought I knew what I was dealing with. Thought I could categorize it. Explain it away. A person. A group. A cult. Something human. I was wrong. The tech team recovered it from a corrupted security feed. One frame. One glimpse before the file went black. It was standing just beyond the tree line. Tall. Too tall. The proportions weren't right. Arms too long. Head tilted at an angle that made my stomach turn. The face wasn't clear, but the eyes, they were. Not like an animal's, not like a person's. Something in between. It was watching, and it knew we were watching back. I ran the image through every database we had. No matches. And then the call came in. "Detective," the officer on duty said, "you need to come outside." "Why?" I asked. "Because he's standing out front." The walk to the front door felt longer than it should have. The air felt wrong, like the building itself was holding its breath. I stepped outside. The street was empty. The cold bit at the back of my neck, sharp and wet, but I barely noticed. He was there, standing in the middle of the parking lot, not moving, not blinking. I knew that face, Ramirez, but it wasn't him, not anymore. His uniform was the same, his stance, the same, but his skin, too pale, his mouth, just a little too wide. His eyes, they weren't human anymore. They were like the ones in the photograph. And then my radio crackled. "Detective." It was the officer inside. His voice was shaking. "He's inside." I turned. The precinct windows were dark. But I knew. Whatever was standing in front of me, it wasn't the only one. And then I heard it. The whisper. Right behind me. The station felt different after that night. It wasn't just the case. It was the weight of something else. Something no one wanted to talk about. But it lingered. In the air. In the walls. In the way people glanced over their shoulders without realizing it. We had the footage. The photos. The witness reports. But none of it explained what we'd seen. What we'd heard. What we now knew. The evidence room was cold. The kind of cold that settles in your bones, not from temperature, but from something else. Something deeper. I started digging. Not just through our case files, but through the ones that came before us. The ones no one talked about. And I found them. Newspaper clippings, testimonies, cases stretching back over 100 years. They all had the same elements. People going missing, no sign of a struggle, bodies turning up miles away in impossible places. And then, the patterns started to show. Every incident happened near the same stretch of forest, near the hollow. Every case followed the same timeline, 2:09 a.m. And every single officer who got too close disappeared or came back wrong. Then I found it, the image, buried in a sealed evidence file from 1952. It was never supposed to be found. It was a photo, black and white, grainy, taken in the woods. In the center of the frame, a man. He was staring directly at the camera. His face was blurred, but you could see the eyes, the same eyes we saw in the footage, the same eyes that watched us from the dark. But that wasn't the worst part. The case number in the corner. It matched Ramirez's. But Ramirez wasn't born until 1985. The man in the photo was him. Standing there, waiting. Decades before he was ever supposed to exist. The precinct felt quieter now. Not peaceful. Just quieter as I pondered through my new findings. After many failed attempts to narrow down our findings, they closed the case. Too many unanswered questions. Too many things that didn't fit. So they shut it down. Some things should stay buried. It's been a year since the incident. Things haven't really been the same around here back at the station. No one could pretend that whatever had happened to Ramirez wasn't real. I packed up my desk, cleared out my files for the day, locked my office door for the last time. As I walked out, I glanced at the security monitor in the corner of the room. The feed flickered. For a second, just a fraction of a second, I saw it. A shape. Behind me. Closer than it should have been. Then it was gone. What do you think really happened? Would you investigate the hollow yourself? Let us know in the comments. If you dare.